So in this lecture, I'm going to say some things about the gods in the story of Dido and Aeneas. Events that happen in the fourth book of the Aeneid seem to us as we read them to have two separate types of cause. The gods cause Dido to fall for Aeneas. The gods in this case being Juno and Venus, and the gods make Aeneas leave. Mercury coming down to Aeneas, but Mercury representing the views of his boss Jupiter. So there are very strong indications that the gods are organising things. At the same time, though, the love affair of Dido and Aeneas makes perfect sense in human terms. Two very beautiful, heroic figures who are leaders of their people in exile, encounter each other. It makes sense that they fall in love with each other. And we might note that Dido needs her sister Anna's support before she commits herself to this love that she's feeling. So that there are clear indications of a human causation, human thinking about it, and human persuasion. I suppose parallel to that human way of understanding why Dido falls for Aeneas and vice versa, is to say that Aeneas can work out perfectly well for himself what he owes to his son, and he knows perfectly well that it's Italy where he needs to settle. So we can understand Aeneas's desire to leave in terms of things that are nothing to do with the gods, even if the gods are involved in that narrative. Okay, what I'm going to do then now is give you further reason to believe that the gods are in fact pulling the strings in this story, but then some reasons to qualify that view. There's a very, very finely composed line and a bit that Virgil uses at 1, 2, 4 to 5. In Latin, spelungam Dido dux et Troianus eandem devenient. Dido and the Trojan general will make their way to the same cave. And what's sort of fabulous about it is the way that the words for the cave, spelungam and eandem, are around the words for Dido and Aeneas, so they're kind of enclosed in the cave. Now, Virgil was so proud of this line of poetry that he repeats it at 1, 6, 5 to 6 with a very minor change. Spelungam Dido dux et Troianus eandem devenient. The only difference between those two quotations are it's a future tense in the verb in the first one and a present tense in the second one. And if I need to say this, I will say that this really isn't just a case of Virgil being proud of himself, though he should be proud of producing such a fantastic line. In the first example, Juno is telling Venus what will happen to Dido and Aeneas, while in the second, we're listening to the poet's narrative of things as they actually unfold. So between Juno saying what will happen and what actually happens, you have lots and lots of human hustle and bustle and decisions and causation. But then you have a moment where you remember very clearly by the absolute repetition of the same words that Juno has organised this from the beginning. And you have a strong sense that ultimately what Juno says goes. It's a very effective implication of divine control of events. But I said I might sort of qualify things a little bit. And a more subtle example of divine-human interaction, though it certainly may not seem it at first sight, is Mercury's first appearance to Aeneas, when Aeneas is involved in building the foundations of Carthage. Mercury appears again in a dream, but it's the first one that I'm referring to here. Now, at one level, this moment is Jupiter, through Mercury, presenting Aeneas with orders, and some pretty incontestable orders. You can pretty much guarantee that anybody who's visited by a god who is saying that he is just a messenger for the highest god of them all is going to take the instructions pretty seriously. However, there was a long tradition in the ancient world of interpreting Mercury, as we say, allegorically, interpreting Mercury as not as a god but as something else. Basically, interpreting Mercury as a symbol of the workings of reason, of human thought. In other words, according to this way of thinking, which we can show that Virgil was influenced by, when Mercury appears to a mortal, this was a way of communicating symbolically that the mortal was changing their mind. Yeah? In other words, the ancients had a perfectly accessible way of understanding Mercury appearing to Aeneas as meaning that Aeneas was seeing reason, that he was coming to his senses, that there he was laying the foundations of Carthage, and he suddenly thought, hold on a second, what am I doing here? I should be founding Rome. Okay. A thing to say about Virgil's gods, an important thing to say about Virgil's gods, is they can't be excluded from the story. They are completely plausible characters within the narrative that Virgil offers us. We believe in them entirely as characters within the story. So that's not a solution. Either. If I was just suggesting that the ancients could think in terms of the gods as not really being gods, well, that's not our experience of the text. We believe that Mercury, in the sense that we believe anything in a fiction, we believe that Mercury is speaking to Aeneas at that point. Ultimately, though, Virgil doesn't let us untangle the causation of things. He suggests to us a whole range of different ways in which we could understand things coming about. But for instance, we hold the idea that Dido has fallen in love because she hugged Cupid in suspension with the equally strong idea that she's fallen in love with Aeneas because Aeneas is a hero. Yeah, and gives an excellent account of trying to defend Carthage. I suppose one thing we're saying there is that Virgil is a poet, not a philosopher. Virgil doesn't need to clarify these things. All Virgil needs to do is tell a story that is compelling and communicates. However, I'm going to complicate things a little bit further there before I finish. Another idea that had become mainstream and that we can show in the ancient world, and that we can show that Virgil was influenced by, was that the Phaeacians in the Odyssey under King Alcinous and Princess Nausicaa and so on. The Phaeacians, on whom Virgil modelled to a large extent the Carthaginians in the Aeneid, the ancient idea was that the Phaeacians were a kind of model for a particular later philosophical school. The Phaeacians were regarded as kind of precursors of the Epicureans, so a particular school of philosophy. And one of the best piece of evidence that Virgil was influenced by this view, this understanding of the Phaeacians, is that Dido and Anna as well have this rather strange habit periodically of talking a lot like Epicureans. For instance, at 376 to 80, this is Dido kind of poo-pooing things that Aeneas has said about directions he's got to leave Carthage. And now we hear about the augur Apollo and lots cast in Lycia. Now, to crown all, the messenger of the gods is bringing terrifying commands down through the winds from Jupiter himself, as though that is work for the gods in heaven, as though that is an anxiety that disturbs their tranquility. Dido is speaking very much like an Epicurean there, because the Epicureans believe that the gods exist, but don't believe that the gods have anything to do with human existence. The gods, according to the Epicureans, just spend their time off in deep space being extremely chilled, being a model for how we should live, actually, but that's the only contact we have with them. They wouldn't get involved in human life because that would cause them disturbance. Okay. This is quite an interesting moment, though, because Epicureanism is a philosophical school. It's perhaps not the most respectable philosophical school, but it's a philosophical school that's followed by many very respectable Romans. And Dido here is using Epicurean doctrine to deny that the gods have any involvement in Aeneas's life. What I'm suggesting is that philosophical position, which is potentially a very, very damaging philosophical position for a lot of what Aeneas is claiming, is part of the reader's perception of the gods in this book too. It's complicated, and that's good.